I, um, I was asked to give you a little bit an insight into novel phenotypic approaches in quantitative analysis of plant development and performance and how networks actually play a role in there. And in that context, I would like to first start with why do we actually need that? Because we have the challenges for agriculture in the 21st century. And that's, on the one hand, this is a necessity to for the environment and all the extremes which we have there, the water use, the decline in biodiversity. On the other hand, there's a lot of demand for food and for non-food aspects. There's also increased quality and diversity which is needed. And food waste is a challenge, so to reduce food waste is very important. For all of this, we need to have quantitative information about crops, about environments, and about the interaction of crops and environment. And this is the reason why we started some years ago already with the phenotyping environment, where we essentially look into plant environment interactions to quantify them, to get deep insights, also to get high throughput in the field as well as in greenhouses, in controlled environments, and also combine it with models. And this, on the one hand, requires that we have the reason for this, on the one hand, that we want to have obviously the gene function as a very important part. On the other hand, breeding and farming have requirements for phenotyping, and also the adaptation to climate change and the sustainable production as a whole are aspects which all ask for improved phenotyping facilities and phenotyping practices. In that context, we then developed a number of pan-European research infrastructures, and that's, on the one hand, specifically in our emphasis background, this is about controlled environments. So this is greenhouses, this is deep phenotyping using NMR, using PET, using CTs. So all the very fancy gears which are providing information about how plants are growing, how plants are acting and performing in controlled environments. On the other hand, we know that we have to go to the field, and therefore intensive field sites are very important. And there are a number of intensive field sites now where you have field systems which are very dedicated to phenotyping, which have a lot of knowledge also included in there about the crops and the technology. These are the intensive field sites. These also include aspects where we simulate future climates, for example, phase systems, or temperature conditions, or also different environments with respect to the soil. And on the other hand, then we have to go to the field level with respect to, for example, farmers and breeders, because they have to also use these technologies and use the aspects. And all together, this develops data systems, and requires modeling. So it's a very complex interaction, which requires a lot of interference of different disciplines, different scales from the greenhouse, from controlled environments to the field, technology providers, as well as users, and people running these facilities. The target questions are on different levels are different. So on the one hand, it's mechanisms of plant growth, for example, at the level of controlled environments. It's also multi-stress environments. If you go to intensive field sites, it requires addresses aspects of improved crop performance in the fields and how they actually develop over the entire vegetation period, or longer if you go to perennials. And then it's about integration of data science and also providing the respective data infrastructures. So on the one hand, this is a wide diversity of scientists which we need in that context, from technology developers, physicists, chemists, which are in their image analysis, people who are using that. AI is very important in the meantime to get more information there. And then the whole diversity of biological questions which are in there. But it's not only the scientists which are needed to integrate in there, it's also the breeders and the farmers, which are very important, because they are obviously delivering the real world questions which we want to develop and which we want to solve with the phenotyping devices. And this also stretches then out to politicians and to the society at large, because obviously, as I mentioned from the beginning, this is not only to get some data, but it's also addressing the societal questions which are out there. So this is therefore in emphasis, what we look for is to have the impact of the state-of-the-art phenotyping research infrastructures, to advance on the one hand the technology part. This is including things like robotics, sensing, artificial learning, artificial intelligence part. This is the phenotyping part in itself, so the operational part, to phenotype environments, to phenotype crops, to phenotype, to also provide services. And there's a systemic part where we also look into modeling, into the ecosystem, the climate change, sustainable food production, so the target systems which are out there, which we also need to address in order to make things properly work and being targeted. And all of this obviously shall lead to integrated sustainable plant production. The advancement of it also looks at the advancements of basic science and its translation into application. It has a technology development component, and it requires innovation in the breeding and farming system. And we also have to use data and simulate systems relevant for sustainable agriculture and food production. So therefore, it's a wide range of different aspects which you also have to address in that context. So the phenotyping networks, therefore, are key because we have to bring many different stakeholders together. And in the past years, sorry for the crowded slide here, essentially there was a lot of national platforms developed. So that there's the French national platform, there's the German national platform, UK, many different national platforms, and there are more than those which are on here. These national platforms have certain roles. Many of them are quite different with respect to being networks or being real providers of technology. But there's a wide range of different things which is done at the national level. At the regional and the project level, there are a number of other aspects in there. For example, there was a cost action where we specifically focused on the integration along the chain from the molecule to the whole plant. That was a cost action which has finished now some 2 or 3 years ago. Very valuable to have to roll out the phenotyping domain into many different aspects where it's actually used. Then we have top projects like EPN 2020 coming to an end now, which are kind of access projects, which are delivering the phenotyping gear to the technology, to the users. And there are a number of other regional aspects. So North America, for example, has not a national part only, but it's including different countries. And obviously the one which I described before, emphasis the pan-European project, an S3 project, where we are developing these technologies as a research infrastructure for a European scale. Beyond that, we have the global networks, and there are some of them, they are more focusing on specific crops. For example, the wheat initiative, there is a working group on wheat phenotyping, which is then integrated back in also these other phenotyping networks. And on the other hand, we have the IPPN, the International Plant Phenotyping Network, which is combining all the global providers and global actors in phenotype and plant phenotyping as a whole. The European projects, as I said, and as you can see from here, EPN 2020 is just coming to an end now. These are providing access to installations, and there have been 31 installations provided here in the EPN 2020. There was a significant amount of money supporting this, providing access to the infrastructures. The advantage of these systems is that you can be a user, apply to these systems, and then get access to the systems if it's selected through a selection process. But beyond that, obviously, we have to go into a kind of longer-term perspective, and that's exactly the mission which Emphasis has, to build a pan-European plant phenotyping research infrastructure, which will facilitate multi-scale phenotyping from the different dimensions, from controlled environment to the field, including modeling and data systems. And it will be develop this by developing the infrastructure, but also provide access to facilities, services, and resources. And that's an ongoing S3 project, which we are working on at the moment with a number of different activities. The objectives is to develop the infrastructure, to link the data and provide a data acquisition, and to develop also the novel technologies which are there and to disseminate them in the wider scale. And the benefits for the different areas, the researchers will benefit from having quantitative plant and assessment. The public sector will have complementary plant phenotyping infrastructure. So this is about also generating synergies within Europe, and the scientific institutions which use these synergies in operating phenotyping infrastructures can work closer together. We are also looking for interaction with industry and farmers. Therefore, the utilization of the innovation happens on the one hand inside the infrastructures, but on the other hand also in the wider context of the dissemination of the products, of the technologies. And society in general, as I started from the beginning, the target is to develop proper support for gaining all these different aspects. So what I tried to do in the presentation is to somehow give you an overview of what kind of technologies and networks are there, that these different technologies are needed in order to develop this research infrastructure and the phenotyping domain. And I think that's already the last slide, which I wanted to show you there, which have the different infrastructure categories and the interaction between the different networks which we need there. Yeah, thanks very much for the attention. I hope that I can still be heard and listen also now to questions.
Thanks very much, Uli. Let me just bring my camera back up here. Thanks very much. That was very interesting little overview there. So, I mean, the Emphasis project is a real grand vision for European phenotyping. So, can you give us a bit of an update about the current status of it? I know it's been going on for about 4 or 5 years now, and I know there's a number of phases it has to go through the funding. So, can you let us know where we are at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. So at the moment we are on the one hand in the implementation phase, which means we are moving from just thinking where the best to take from. Yeah, probably take this one. The implementation phase. We are just finishing the Emphasis Prep project, which is funded from the European Commission in order to set up all these different aspects. To bring all the different national stakeholders, to bring in the different countries' perspectives. That's now coming to an end because the funding is coming to an end. We are not finally in an operational phase from Emphasis. Therefore, we are in what we call the implementation phase. So this is the interim phase between the design of the whole thing into a real operational phase. This requires a lot of discussions, a lot of, say, more less science-based, but more kind of operational aspects. So we are presently talking to 12 ministries in 12 countries in Europe who are willing to support and to develop Emphasis together with the scientific community. We formed a intergovernmental arrangement there where they are meeting from time to time and discuss, and they all in the end are the deciding body. The target so far is that there will be a legal structure which is called an ERIC, a European Research Infrastructure Company, which would then be owned by the countries. And the countries would then be those who are running this company. This company essentially has the entire goal of that is to set up all the different technologies and the services which we have which we want to install in the end, or the ERIC wants to install in the end. At the moment, we are running a number of pilot services which are in field phenotyping, which are in structuring the standard operation procedures for phenotyping. Also, the access which we had in IPN 2020 was a kind of best practice example, pilot service to check how this service would work afterwards. This is the stuff which is actually going on. In parallel, there's a lot of legal discussions which are going on, participation discussions between different countries. It's always an open process. It's also building up the national platforms within Europe and beyond, and also linking to the other actors which are out there. And always looking for what is the best service which we can provide to the community.
Okay. Yeah. So the EPPN 2020 grant that provided occasional opportunities for people all around Europe, in any countries, I think, to apply to have access. So that will be the overall goal of emphasis, once it's finally set up, to have that pan-European access or pan-global access for people to be involved with the facilities that are set up?
Yeah, so at the moment, as I said, the access projects, which were EPN and EPN 2020, this European projects, they are presently coming to an end in that structure. So there was the last call was just now, and this EPN 2020 is still running until the end of the year. So the accesses will continue until end of the year, but the call has been finished now. So this is obviously a thing which we also target for emphasis, that we have something similar to that. This is not easily to be transferred from the present situation with Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020 up to now into a Horizon Europe background. Mm-hmm. This is definitely a target which we want to achieve, that we can provide also accesses similar to EPN 2020 also to the different platforms. On top of that, it's also giving support to different platforms themselves, because running a platform is not that easy. There are also services in there which are giving a kind of, which I described before with the pilot services, that there are also things like, how do you quality assured phenotyping, how does this actually work? The data platform is very important, so also emphasis will provide a kind of data structure with that. Not that everything has to go to emphasis as a kind of central server, but rather kind of structure how things would optimally work. There's a number of examples what emphasis would target for as missions or as services for the community in the future. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the machinations of the European Union are a little confusing at the best of times. But so if, assuming that everything goes forward and these 12 member countries agree to it, then there will be as I understand it, there'll be a core funding that will be always there, but then that is contributed by the European Union itself. But are each of those 12 countries contributing financially as well, or is it from a central pot?
No, it's actually that the Commission is not actually involved in that. So essentially, it would be the ERIC itself would be funded from the members, from the states which are signing in. So that can be this 12, but it can be a smaller number, can also be a growing number. And that would be a delivery of money that's the target to run this kind of central services. It will not be the case that emphasis will own the research infrastructures, because they are still obviously in the ownership of the countries or of the research organizations which are running the infrastructures. So emphasis will be a kind of hub situation where we are providing these different services, where we also have service level agreements with the different infrastructures, so that it can be used, for example, if someone would have an experiment at different sites with different soils, with different climates across Europe in different backgrounds in field experiments, for example. We could come up with a selection of emphasis approved field sites which have all the different opportunities to link them, and that would be another kind of portal service which emphasis would also provide to the community.
I see. So I'm trying to locate the questions, but I can't quite find them yet, which is why I'm asking. But I think there are some additional questions. But let me ask a final one, which is now going out of my head. Oh yes. So let me just ask about so I know that Elixir is another S3 project. So will there be, and that's very focused on data, so there would seem to be an obvious link between emphasis and Elixir. And will that be ongoing, do you think?
Yeah, of course. So because there's a whole landscape of different S3s which we are somehow interlinked. So on the one hand, from the data side, obviously Elixir is a very important one. The target is not to duplicate things, but to rather interlink between the different infrastructures. Another one is ANAE. ANAE is more focusing on the crop management ecology background, and we're actually preparing at the moment also for a proposal which is interlinking quite a number of different S3 networks or S3 infrastructures. From our immediate core part, which is food and health, which is where our activities are in, but also going beyond. So also going into the more kind of technology background, where there are also other infrastructures, S3 infrastructures, which we could use in the context of agricultural and ecology background, which we target with our activities.
Okay, right. So thanks so much, David. You popped up here. Can you ask the questions that have come through? I'm a bit confused here.
Sure, of course I can. It's again, just to repeat for everybody, it's in the Live Now button on the left-hand side. If you want to ask a question, go into Live Now, drop down to the bottom of that. You need to select Ulrich Schurr rather than Uli Schurr, I think, as speaker. And then under questions, you can add a question, or you can see the questions that are there. So Christoph asks, can you come back on how this infrastructure can be used for a public researcher? Are there any country restrictions, non-EU, for instance?
So that a little bit depends on which kind of background we go. So as if we take EPN 2020, which was the project which we are running at the moment to access that from a European perspective. There was a call, so as I said, this has finished now, but we are trying to establish this again in the future in different contexts. So in that specific case, people could apply, everybody could apply. Industry was also able to apply, but also public research organizations could apply with a certain proposal. There is a list in the EPN 2020 websites of all the different research infrastructures. People could select what kind of topic, what kind of infrastructure they would need for their scientific questions, or their, for example, root infrastructures or infrastructures about water relations, whatever. This is listed there, and all these infrastructures are listed there. They are also on the emphasis website for a much wider aspect now. And then people had to apply through a mechanism which, in that specific case, was then funded by the Commission, where the access to the infrastructure, as well as the infrastructure costs which the infrastructure provider itself had, are somehow covered. And that obviously depends on the specific project which was selected. With respect to restrictions, within the EPPN background, the restriction was that it had to be transnational. So whatever, say, French were able to apply for Germany, and Germany was able to apply for the Dutch, but it was not possible to do Germany in Germany or France in France, because obviously it's European money and this should foster European interaction. So that was one restriction. Otherwise, there was not a real restriction in there, except of bringing up a good project, which is also feasible to be done on the infrastructures. And it was also open, and we had a number of applications also, and also projects which were run from outside Europe. So there's also a possibility there for others to apply for that. How the rules of that will be in the future, if you have emphasis up and running, that very much will depend on the setup which we are presently developing during that implementation phase.
Great, thank you. There's another question from Iris Mayer. I might have missed it, Ulrich. Did you mention which species the project involves or will involve?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a essentially open technology platform. So we have many different species in there, depending on what people would like to use. So this is also part of the development of the project. If people apply, so they need to indicate what kind of species they are working with. So we have platforms which are using Arabidopsis, as well as platforms which are using which even go to trees. So you could have the full width of different species. This obviously very much always depends on the specific infrastructure and technology platform which is needed, which is available. But this is not focusing on one specific species only.
Thank you. And I guess my question was just a very broad one about capturing the engagement of farmers and growers. And I suppose I was thinking about the really major ones that there are now, who are using very complex technological systems for their agriculture. GPS monitoring yields, inputs, and everything else. And to the extent to which that data, possibly using existing varieties, can be captured within all of this. And I suppose ultimately to encourage farmers and growers to be scientists and actually responsive to the key information that comes out of a study like this one, which I think becomes more and more crucial as we worry about CO2 outputs from agriculture and methane outputs and pesticide inputs and water usage and so on.
Yeah. So essentially, what you're addressing is also digital agriculture, digital farming background. This is obviously, so first emphasis is more focusing on the breeding part, but obviously a lot of the technologies can also spill over to the agricultural management part. And there are actually also activities in that direction, which are from within the members of emphasis, or the people who are working in emphasis, working towards the agricultural management part. So we, for example, ourselves, we are also involved in agricultural robotics, which is kind of the next step after digital agriculture on the tractor. This, on the one hand, includes all the gaining of information, gaining the data in a proper way to have a reliable data and to have quality data on the one hand. On the other hand, and that's on the slide which is still on the monitor here, it requires also the data systems in the modeling, so to interact, to interface all these different layers. This requires, on the one hand, infrastructure. This requires also concepts and agreements, how data could be exchanged and can be exchanged, and what kind of minimum data is required. So, for example, one of a project which is linked to emphasis is the MIAP project, where there is a design, this description of what is the minimal data set which is needed in order to do proper phenotyping. Because otherwise you cannot bring data together. So this is also an ongoing project, also linking emphasis also with Elixir in a certain way. Beyond that, the question of if you target towards what do people properly do with the data which they get also from the field data with the digital farming, I think that's still a lot of discussions there, because in many cases this is also bringing up the question of data ownership. So if you have a farmer who is using digital agriculture in the field, they got a lot of data. This is not necessarily open data. This but there are discussions on that, how this could be improved and under which conditions this would happen. This is obviously also a question of who are the actors in this kind of digital farming space. Is it the individual farmer? Is it a consortium of technology providers, tech providers there? So this is a really a wide range of question, a wide-reaching question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thanks, David, for stepping in there. So let me finish then with maybe a final question where you think about. So this is obviously very technology based within Europe, but these ideas about minimum requirements for agriculture, they're really a global thing, and they will impact the global south a lot more, so we can understand the data that's being generated there and how that will be beneficial. So how do you see links between emphasis and almost smallholders in countries where where it's more of a individual farmers rather than a large consortium?
Yeah. So the reason why I put up this slide here is that it shows that there are kind of partner organizations in different parts of the globe. Mm-hmm. As I said, this is not full, not everything in there. We have Chinese, there's a lot of Australia, there is Southeast Asia, a number of things. There is obviously the US, there is South America. There are many things out there. At the moment, the part which is really sadly missing is a lot of Africa. But if you look in the IPPN, which is the international network where I'm also hosting, being the president at the moment, in IPPN we also bring together this global perspective, and we also have work groups in the IPPN which are addressing, for example, something which we call affordable phenotyping. So in the past, a lot of the phenotyping developments have been done in move towards pretty expensive gear. That was obviously also the part of the reason why we have this initiatives like Emphasis providing this expensive gear to a broad user group. On the other hand, everybody of us has now this kind of smartphone things next to ourselves, and this is compute power, which is enormous. There's a lot of additional technologies in there. You can have thermography on your smartphone. You can have many different three-dimensional things. There are lidars now, even in the new phones, which are provided from the provider itself. So there's a lot of technology development in there, and this is also a target which we go through a number of different routes directly with farmers, with breeders in the global south, in order to provide them with these kind of technologies. There's a huge opportunity there, I think, because it's providing the technology at the level where it's needed, and the developments there are pretty quickly towards low-cost, affordable phenotyping, which provides data which they never could had before. Actually, not only for the global south, but this is also obviously available in other areas. Not everybody wants to have a big phenotyping facility, but if you have a smartphone somewhere and you take your pictures and you get your data, why not? So this is also a possibility to disseminate in many different dimensions.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Ulrich. So I think we've really expanded into the extra time we had here this morning, both for the technical and the fact that we didn't have another speaker in this session. So thank you very much for the contribution. It's really great to see this and to hear the update on this, pan-European phenotyping, pan-global phenotyping, indeed. So I think for the next session in the InDepth Academy is due to begin at 11:25, I think, if that's right. Confirm that, David? Yeah, okay. So Dionysia will be talking about some work that she's doing on maize, I think. So please come back. And if I know a few people have just joined us later towards the end of this session, this recording will be available soon on the platform, so you can go back and hear about it. It's a really nice short slice of what's going on in the phenotyping world. So okay, so I think we can just end it there and say thank you again, and we'll see you a little later on. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.